Mic check, mic check. Perfect. So today is going to be a different topic. Today we're going to be talking about something that is overlooked, I believe, by everybody, be it in business or in just personal life in general. So today's topic is going to be something that, in my opinion, accounts for 99%, well, maybe a little overshoot, but 90% of your success in business, especially as a software engineer. And this is what we call the mundum visum. So this is Latin for worldview. And I know what you're thinking. Great. Another mindset video. We go, great job. We're definitely not tired of it. No, but seriously, every single person here also knows that the most important thing in business, actually in life in general, is this, your worldview. If you take a look at figures such as Elon Musk, if you take a look at figures such as, let's say, Jeff Bezos, the tech giants of the world, the top 3 wealthiest men right now have over $1 trillion. For reference, in some parts of the world, that is more than literally billions of people if you amount all of their wealth. So how can 3 individuals have nearly, well, not nearly, more power and more wealth than some countries in the entire world? One person versus hundreds of millions, if not billions of people. So let's first understand the main difference as to what really accounts as worldview, okay? In essence, worldview is everything that dictates where you are today, where you were 10 years ago, and where you will be 10 years from now. Because your worldview dictates your actions, okay, and your actions, which are basically your ends, so we're gonna mark this as ends, dictate your results. Results. And I'm gonna dictate this as out. So your ends, right, you put something in, you get something out. Your worldview, what you believe the world is like, will dictate your actions, and your actions will dictate the results that you get in this life as well as in your business in general, especially as a software engineer. Now, as software engineers, our worldview, right, from what I have found, is quite consistent across all software engineers. It's get a 9-to-5 position, right, possibly at first an internship of some kind, get that internship, tailor that into a full-time job, and then from then on, grind that job, gain a little bit of experience, possibly do some lead code questions, and hopefully you break into a FANG position. That's one route. The other route is possibly to go the startup route, get some equity within that startup, right, and then IPO, and then make millions of dollars, as we saw with, let's say, NVIDIA, right? Pretty much every single NVIDIA employee that was working there about 20 years ago is now a multimillionaire. So that's basically the 2 paths. Go the FANG route, right? Make a lot of money in salary and then 401k it, retire it at, let's say, 40 or 45, 50, whatever the case, or go the startup route, a little bit more risky, right? Try to get equity in that IPO and then make your money off that. Very few people will ever deviate from that path, go on to become startup founders themselves, whether they, create a SaaS or whatever the case. And even those that do, as we already know, 9 out of 10 of them will fail. Okay, so what is the main difference between every single one of you watching this? What's your difference with me, and what's my difference with, let's say, the top 3 wealthiest people in the world who actually happen to be software engineers themselves? Once again, it all connects back to worldview, and now let me explain why specifically this is the case. And the reason I say mundum visum instead of just worldview is because mundum visum in Latin, and it translates differently to then just worldview. There's a lot more deeper meaning into the words. Maybe I'll get into the schematics later if need be. But another thing we have to understand. So let's assume that this right here, okay, this is, just assume that it's a black rectangle and I filled it in, okay? And we have observers looking at this specific black rectangle. Imagine I just filled it out, okay? We have 3 observers. This is me. This is you. And here we can have, let's say, Elon Musk or Jeff Bezos or whoever the case, whoever you deem to be as the most successful person that you can find. For me, in this specific example, I'm valuing success with regards to the power to impact the world And in terms of Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos, at least in the public eye, they're one of the most powerful people in the world. Of course, on the back end of things, I'm not going to talk about this stuff on YouTube, but on the back end of things operate very differently. But for example's sake, let's just go with this. So me right now, let's assume that I have these green lens that I'm wearing, these green goggles. You, on the other hand, have yellow goggles. So here I'm going to put G, here I'm going to put yellow. And then we're going to have Musk here with no goggles whatsoever. What ends up happening is when I take a look at this black square, black rectangle, right? When somebody asks me to take a look at this black rectangle, I take a look at it, and since I'm wearing green goggles, right? I have a green lens on, I see this as green. Whenever you take a look at this, and because you have yellow lens on, you see this as yellow. When I ask Elon to take a look at this, he sees it for what the true color is, as black. And then the person who's asking us to actually look at the colors, right, and describe what the color was, is asking the observers, us, to describe what color we saw. I say it's green, you say it's yellow, Musk says it's black. I say you guys are crazy, you're delusional, I literally can see that it's green. You say you're delusional, I can literally see that it's yellow. We both end up fighting in the comments or whatever the case, life goes on 5 years, 10 years. And Elon over here, he's not bothering with us because he sees that it's black, and the person who asked the question confirms that it is in fact black. Both of us cannot accept this reality, okay? Because to us, this is what our experience has taught us. The life that we've lived until to this point, this is what it has taught us. And we've always, been told by our parents, only judge things that you can see with your own two eyes. So in that case, what can we do? If we know objectively speaking that this is in fact black, but we have these goggles on, these lenses on, and we don't even know that we have these lenses on, right? And what can we really do? How can we move forward? Well, let me first explain what these lenses even are and why we have them in the first place. So, like many of you watching, you probably adopted a lot of your current beliefs and a lot of what you hold true about the world, essentially your worldview, how you view the world, from possibly your parents, your environment growing up, right? And potentially genetically as well a little bit. So a little bit of nurture and nature. What do you think the percentage of people are who have these goggles versus who don't have these goggles? Anybody? What percentage do you think of people who have the goggles versus who don't have the goggles is?
About 98% of the people have the goggles.
90 or 98% will have the goggles? Okay, so let's go with that metric right now. 98%. So let's assume 98% are going to have these goggles. And once again, I'm using myself as an example here. This is the yellow goggles. So let's see where these goggles are coming from. So I'm going to point them over here. These goggles stem from childhood, right? Parents, environment, and blah, 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 blah. And whatever essentially you saw. It's a little bit of nature and nurture. So depending on where we grew up, I grew up in a post-Soviet country. For me, my goggles had to do a lot with wealth. I thought the only way you can get rich is if you're a corrupt oligarch and you were ripping off the regular citizens or taxpayers. Somebody else that grew up in a different country, even in a similar country, might share my same exact concerns. Somebody, for example, from the US might see, let's say, a Lamborghini at a gas station or whatever and say, okay, that person can only get that money if they nowadays did like a crypto scam, right? They rugged a meme coin, or they are drug trafficking, or whatever the case. But every single person has these type of goggles. And from the audience, we heard that if we assume 98%, right, have these goggles, then that would mean only 2% do not have these goggles. So this means something very interesting. Every single one of you watching has these goggles, I can guarantee it. Because if you didn't have these goggles, then I would be watching the video that you probably made, right? And even I myself, who have these goggles, I'm still looking constantly to see, do I have these goggles on, or not at every single point in time. Because you see, when you observe people such as this person over here with no goggles, you start realizing that there's a lot of things that are simply not true in this world. And the worldview that we held, that stemmed from our childhood, our parents, our environment, simply do not hold true. One of those specifically having to do with business, okay? So if we take a look at, for example, business statistics, right? We have 9 out of 10 startups that fail, right? And then I think it's 50% of businesses within the first year fail, right? 50% within first year. I don't remember the numbers off the top of my head. And then I think 70% or 2/3 within the first 5 years. So essentially the chances of your business lasting over, let's say, like 10 years, it's under 25%. I don't know if this is true, but my guess is this is most likely very true. And if we assume the longer you can stay in business, the better your worldview is, right? Which meaning you have more of a factual worldview, then that would mean that this number in reality would actually have to be probably closer to basically something like that, to the limit, okay? And in reality, you would have something like this. So I would say, from what I have observed, very few people in this world actually do not have these goggles. Everybody has these type of goggles. For some people, it's a very dark color of, let's say, a green or a red. Some people, it's a lighter color. Some people, it might be transparent, but nevertheless, most people still have these goggles. Only very few people in the world do not have these goggles. And most of the time, that's not necessarily within all realms, right? One person can have the goggles within business, but does not have the goggles within something else, let's say fitness, right? This is why you see that there's always an expert in one specific thing. You don't have an expert that's an expert across various industries or various practices. You don't have somebody that's the world's best businessman, also be the world's best fitness coach, let's say, also be the world's best painter, also be the world's best, artist, whatever the case. So in every single endeavor, in every single human endeavor, there's a scale of pretty much who has the goggles and who doesn't have the goggles, and essentially how dark the goggles are versus to how light the goggles are. I have found the more successful the person, the more money that they have made, they tend to be closer on this side with regards to their goggles in business and their worldview of money, how they see money. So if you ask Musk or you ask anybody else, is 100K a lot of money? Is $1 million a lot of money? Or how easy is it to make that amount of money? You're gonna get a completely different answer versus if you ask, let's say, just your everyday average software engineer who's making, 150K a year, okay? So understand that everything you want in life, every single little thing, has to do with these goggles and your worldview. So how do you exactly change your worldview? How do you make sure that your worldview right now is not sabotaging you? Well, you have to ask one very important question that almost nobody asks. What if I'm wrong? So this question is not asked enough. You might ask this on a test if you're taking it, you might ask this on a project you're doing, you might ask this on an assignment you're doing. But you'll never ever ask this question for the long term, be it 5 years down the line, 10 years down the line, 15 years down the line. What if you are wrong? What if the current beliefs that you hold, your current worldview, what you believe to be true about the world is wrong? And let's say you ask this question and yes, you assume that yes, you are wrong. Okay, how do you learn the truth? How do you actually begin to adopt the quote-unquote real worldview and how the real world functions, right? So let alone before you even come here, you first have to get to this point. You first have to ask, what if I'm wrong? What if your current view of money is wrong? What if your current view of business is wrong? What if your current view of, the only way to get rich is to be a bad person is wrong, okay? And it's going to be extremely difficult for you to do so because a lot of you have built your entire worldview, as I mentioned before, on nature and nurture. So it's going to be extremely counterintuitive for you, and it's going to be against your gut to kind of go against that feeling and try to find this quote-unquote real worldview. So how do you do so? Well, you do what I did. You begin actually networking and meeting people who are where you wish to be. By that I mean they live in the house you want to live, they have the family you want to have, right? They have the maybe financial situation you want to have, and they are where you yourself want to be. Where do you meet these people? A lot of different places, right? So right off the bat, it's going to be dependent on your location, but I recommend go to your Chamber of Commerce. So especially those of you in the United States, very easy, or even a BIN, join a BIN. If you're in the United States, you do these two things. Main reason being, you get access to a room full of business owners making multiple millions of dollars every single year, some maybe in the billions, and you get access to them for free. You can talk to them, observe their life, observe their choices, how they run the business, and what beliefs they hold. And you can see somebody who is making essentially an amount of money that you might not have thought possible, but completely for free. You'll maybe end up paying a very small initiation fee to join these places, but all you really have to do is just pick your butt up, go to these places and start communicating with people and talking. Because everything, once again, comes from lack of knowledge, right? Your worldview is constructed from your experiences, but if you haven't had the proper experience, or you haven't kind of seen something that is true, right? You won't ever know if it is true or not. You'll only be able to guess it at best, right? So that's why you need to see it with your own two eyes and experience it and understand that, okay, this is exactly possible. So if you're a software engineer, sign up for your local Chamber of Commerce, sign up to any BIN, right? And start thinking about starting a business and start meeting business owners. Because the most successful people in this world, or I should say financially successful people in this world, are going to be business owners, right? Now, once again, there's some other stuff I cannot talk exactly on YouTube, and I'm not going to, but for this purpose, go ahead and do this, okay? After you join these, what you'll find is there'll be two categories of people. There'll be most likely those like you, those wishing to learn, and there'll be others who you'll learn from. So we'll call them the teachers. Excuse my handwriting. I just realized it is horrendous. It'll be split into two groups. People who are there just like you to learn, and then people who are there to actually teach. And they're not obviously there to teach, but most likely than not, they'll be ending up as your teachers or mentors, whatever the case, because you'll be learning from them, and you'll be able to learn a significant amount from them. And what's going to happen is you'll notice the relationship between these two types of people. The longer you start spending time with them, the more you start adopting their worldviews, the more you start listening to them, the more you start taking action based on what they tell you. Over the course of months, weeks, years, whatever the case, you're slowly gonna yourself go from learning to potentially also involuntarily teaching others, because you start becoming the example here. And this cycle constantly repeats. Okay? So what ends up happening, the best way for me to explain this is as follows. Usually, behind every single successful person, there are a mountain of other shoulders that successful person is standing upon, okay? And I'm not gonna get into a self-made argument over here, because that's completely different from what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is even all the great men nowadays, right? They built their current beliefs or their worldview based on previously existing great men. So a lot of people look at Alexander, for example. Alexander the Great, right? Then he inspired however many generals, and then those guys inspired however many people, right? So since you guys are software engineers, you'll understand. This is basically a tree data structure in a sense, okay? And this tree keeps going down, and then we get to, let's say, this point over here, and then we have Elon. So we can definitely take a look at Elon, right? Or we can go back to the roots and see who Elon learned it from all the way up, right? And most of these people will either be Jesus of Nazareth, it'll be Alexander the Great, or maybe we can go even further, right? But you'll have certain centric figures that a lot of people have used as their foundation of what a worldview is and what is possible. So Alexander, I believe at the age of 23, he conquered half of the known world at the time, okay? At the age of 14, he led his first battle on horseback, right? At the age of 23, he conquered half of the known world. At the age of 23, right, one of the first questions that I asked myself was, if Alexander conquered half the world, the known world I should say, at that specific age, am I capable of at least being able to retire my parents? And by retire, I mean fully be able to not only fund their lifestyle, but also make sure they don't ever have to work an ounce in the day, and also make sure that any amount of money they need to do whatever they want to do, they're able to do so. That's what I mean when I say retire. So if we take a look at the worldview that I had at the time, okay, what ends up happening? So I think, I'm like, okay, if I'm 23, will I ever be able to retire my parents, right? So my thought is, if we consider this like a drop in the ocean, right? I'm just a little drop in this big ocean over here. This is just what I want, let's say, out of life, to be able to retire my parents at the age of 23, right? Now, if I were to compare Alexander's drop, what would that look like? Well, probably something like that, right? Because this is only going to impact 2 people in my life, and this, he's conquering half of the known world at the time. And in many of our lives, every single one of us watching, we have this certain thing we want to accomplish at a certain age, okay? Be it a goal, be it a dream we want to achieve. And we'll always measure it up to other people's achievements. So the first thing you need to understand is that, okay, if this was a possibility over here, is this a possibility? And if you follow logical reasoning, yes, it should be a possibility because the scales over here are astronomical. There's an astronomical difference between these two. So theoretically speaking, if this was possible, then this is surely possible. Okay, so what I do now is I take a look. Are there existing case studies? Anybody else, let's say 23 years or younger, that has been able to retire their parents? You do a little bit of research, you find, yes, one person over here, one person over here, one person over here, one person over here, one person over here. Okay, this is definitely a possibility. All I need now is I know it fundamentally exists, it's capable. Can I myself do it? Okay, now that opens up a different question. Are you yourself capable of achieving these things, right? So let's take a look at what contributes to if you're able to do something or not. And once again, I'm going to leave Alexander over here because I'm going to use him as an example. So from a young age, Alexander was told that he was of divine lineage. More specifically, he was told by his mother that he was the son of Zeus. So already growing up, he had a very narcissistic complex, okay? He had an extremely great ego. And that is because you grow up, you're already a son of a king who's well-known, well-established, well-respected, an authoritative figure. On top of that, you have a mother telling you that you are the son of Zeus and you are of divine lineage and the whole world should be in a palm of your hands. So this kid ended up, growing up and adopting this specific belief. And I can tell you that I can erase this name over here and I can put myself in here. I can erase my name. I can put you in here. Or I can put literally almost anybody else in here. And given that same situation, given the same nurture and nature that led to essentially Alexander growing the way he did, and the mother telling him that he's the son of Zeus, pushing these types of beliefs into him at a really young age, and also having him adopt that kind of a worldview, that the entire world should be under his rule, any single person here most likely would have been able to achieve what he did, if not more, okay? So the chances of you being in this situation at that exact time frame, right, and being able to achieve what he did, there's a very high possibility that you could have achieved what he did. Of course, I'm not going to get into the nature argument here because, especially if you had a disability or whatever the case. So for that, let's just take that out of the equation. But if you're all healthy, thank the Lord, and you don't have any of those types of issues, let's consider more so the nurture argument, okay? I can replace this question mark any single human being, right? Put them back at that time, give them the same exact mother, give them the same exact father, tell them to essentially treat the person the same exact way as they would have Alexander, and they would have at least still done something great enough to have been recorded in the history books thousands of years later, okay? So that defeats the argument of, can I do it, right? Because at the end of the day, once again, everything links back to our worldview. If we fundamentally have a wrong worldview, right? This is what we'll be able to achieve if we consider this the entire world, okay? The better our worldview, the more we'll be able to achieve and the bigger of an impact we'll have on this world, okay? And the closer that we get to having a proper worldview, the bigger and bigger things we'll be able to actually accomplish. But should we continuously disregard this information and think to ourselves that no, I can only amount to this much, and as I grow older, it's going to get worse and worse and worse, and what's going to happen is it's going to have diminishing returns, and you're going to have the exact opposite of what should happen, which is that over time you understand that your worldview is incorrect, and many of the beliefs that you hold are simply not true, and there is a lot more to this world than you might think there is, okay? And what ends up happening is this is how it should go. At first you believe about this much. You learn more about the world, you start to understand, okay, I can actually amount to this much. You learn even further, you're like, actually, I can probably get to this much. And the more you try, be it in business, be it in whatever the case, the more you fail, the more you learn, the more money you start making, the more people you meet, the more places you travel to, the more cultures you start to understand, the more wealthy individuals you befriend, the more crazy stuff that you see, the more stuff that you experience, and all these things that teach you, the bigger and bigger this gets in specific aspects of life. Be it money, be it health, right? Be it in relationships, whatever the case. This is true for every single endeavor that is human endeavor in this world, okay? And your goal is to go and expand and never ever shrink this kind of impact that you can have on the world. And that is why Mundum Visum, your worldview, is fundamentally speaking the most important thing that you need to work on in your life. And once again, we already countered the arguments that, oh, I can't do it myself. We just told you how that has completely to do with if you're looking at the right place or not, right? And who you're using as the person that you're studying, right? Always go back to the roots of the person. And the second thing is, am I too late? Or can I still achieve what, let's say, I want to achieve in terms of my dreams, okay? Now, maybe you might not be able to, let's say, ever, whoa, me almost dropped. You might not ever able, let's say, get to this level in your lifetime. But let's say you watched this video and currently right now you're here, and let's just assume I'm God, I'm omnipotent, and I can see the future, and you will have never achieved this anyways, right? But because you watch this video and because you start questioning things, you start asking yourself, what if I'm wrong? Let me just go and make sure that I'm not wrong about this specific thing. Let me try to do everything in my power to get into these specific rooms, to meet these types of people, to try to understand and experience as much as I can about this world to see what's true and what's not true. And then all of a sudden, now you're over here. Maybe it's okay that you didn't get to accomplish this, but at least you didn't die over here knowing that you could have gotten here. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is why your worldview is that important.